Ah, the fabled PlayStation console that you only heard about in import magazines or from your friends who had an uncle that worked at Sony. As it turns out, this thing was very real. And if that's the case, why didn't we get to play it? Let's take a look. From my perspective as a child, there were many different Sony products that were labeled the mythological PSX. But the real PSX was actually released in Japan by Sony on December 13th, 2003. What exactly is it? It's Sony's digital video recorder that is fully integrated with a PlayStation 2. Why didn't you hear more about this in video game magazines? Because it was designed to be a consumer-friendly, general-purpose video device, or just another AV component, this thing doesn't carry the PlayStation branding. So instead of being marketed by Sony Computer Entertainment, this bad boy was marketed by the main Sony Corporation instead. So the same division that would sell you Sony TVs and audio components. And what exactly does this thing do? Well, who remembers the TiVo? It was that fancy box that sat under your TV with a hard drive in it, where you can then sit down at your leisure and watch whatever show you wanted in whatever order you want. A problem we don't have today. Think of the PSX as a TiVo with a built-in PlayStation 2, plus a little bit more. For starters, let's take a look at the back. This thing featured S-video and composite inputs and outputs. So just like a TiVo, you would plug your cable or satellite box directly into this, and then you could program all of your recording. It also had coaxial inputs and outputs, meaning you were able to tune into UHF analog television channels over the airwaves. Again, something we don't have anymore. It also had linking and compatibility with the Sony PlayStation Portable, so you could transfer photos, video, and music via the USB port. This thing also contained software that allowed you to do non-linear video, photo, and audio editing. So you could actually plug your camcorder into this thing and edit your video files on it, which for 2003 was kind of neat. It actually had DVD minus and plus R compatibility, which means this thing would play burned DVDs, something that back in 2003, not a lot of things were able to do. Onto the gaming aspects of this little thing. Inside this thing is a fully functional PlayStation 2. As you can see on the back here, it actually had 2 ports for the DualShock 2 controller. And on the front here, it actually had ports for your PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1 memory cards. Unfortunately though, it was not compatible with the Pocket Station, which was Sony's answer to the VMU. It's kind of a bummer. The PSX is also fully compatible with any of the PlayStation 2 hard drive-based games like Final Fantasy XI. Let's boot this thing up real quick, and I'm going to show you the really unique thing about the PSX. This was the very first appearance of Sony's cross-media bar. This was the very first time Sony introduced its fans to the XMB, something that would become the norm for the PlayStation Portable and later the blueprint for the PlayStation 3. As far as game functionality goes on this thing, it's fully compatible with almost every single game in the PlayStation 2 library, and it's fully compatible with the PlayStation 1 library, which at the time, if you had fairly large PlayStation game libraries, it made this thing a must-have for your entertainment center. The caveat is, and why I say almost the entire PlayStation 2 library, is this thing is not compatible with the PS2 multi-tap. So if you had a 4-player game you wanted to play, you were out of luck. Another interesting note is that the PSX did not come with a DualShock 2 pack-in, so no controller when you bought this thing, but they did offer a PSX branded DualShock 2 that had an extra long cable because, as you saw, the controller ports are on the back of this. Another neat little item you did get with this thing though was the PSX themed remote control. It gave you all the controls that you would want and then some to control just about everything that you would want with the PSX. At launch, the PSX was offered in 2 different variations, a 160 gig internal hard drive and one with a 250 gig internal hard drive. Now over the lifespan of the PSX, there were 8 different variations of this machine. Contrary to popular belief, the machine was actually not compatible with PlayStation Portable games or UMD discs at all. The one bad thing about trying to get one of these machines these days is they had tons of fail points. So while you can import one from Japan, chances are when you get it, something is not going to work. The lasers in these are notorious for failing. I got lucky with this one. It had a few problems, but Dr. Mod was able to fix it up for me, and he was able to convert all the menus over to English, and with the help of Free McBoot installed on this appropriately labeled PSX memory card, it will play all North American games now as well. And actually, when I got this thing, it was still loaded with a ton of Japanese television shows, most of which I left on here because I find it kind of fun to go back and check them out. It's almost like a little time capsule. So while thanks to technology just outpacing itself, you really can't utilize much of the features on this machine anymore, but it still is a really interesting piece of video game history, in my opinion. I do find it very interesting that Sony decided to market this on the AV or TV side of their business and not the video game side of their business. But I do also think that the window we had for DVRs and their importance in like society in general was very small. The PSX actually did exist. If you want to check out more obscure consoles like this, including the fabled Nintendo 64 disk drive, check out my last video on it right here. And if you like this sort of stuff, don't forget to subscribe. Follow along for more weird factoids on video games like this one.